This HOA Karen thought she could get away with smashing my trash can 57 times using her $60 Escalade. So I swapped it out for a concrete one, and ended up watching her wreck her own luxury SUV. What began as her daily routine of driveway destruction turned into criminal charges, $1.12 zero payout, and one very pricey reminder that she picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. Just picture it, the crack of plastic splitting at sunrise, the screech of metal against pavement, and her pearl, white Escalade peeling off while my garbage spilled like confetti, again. But here's the thing about bull is they never see it coming when the victim fights back with concrete proof. By the time this so-called rule enforcer was done, she trashed her own ride, uncovered a $47 zero embezzlement scandal, and realized that not every neighbor folds under fake authority and aid. Clipboard, so tell me, if your neighbor was turning your property into a demolition derby every morning, what would you do? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. I want to know, does HOA madness like this happen in your neighborhood too? Let me rewind and explain how this chaos all started. My name's Marcus Holloway. I'm 45, been working as an electrician for over 2 decades. Recently divorced, locked in a custody battle for my 2 teenagers, Emma, 16, and Tyler, 14. We live in Pinewood Gardens, one of those perfect HOA suburbs in Ohio where every lawn has to be exactly 2.5 inches tall, and mailboxes come in only 3 approved colors. I bought a corner lot home here 3 years ago, right after my divorce. I thought it would be a fresh start, safe streets, good schools, the kids each having their own room. What I didn't expect was dealing with her, Brenda Whitmore. She's 52, a widow, and appointed herself as the neighborhood's compliance officer. Problem is, that title doesn't even exist in our HOA bylaws. Brenda drives a Pearl, white Escalade the size of a small apartment, and she moved here around the same time I did. No kids, retired banker, knows every HOA rule like scripture, and acts like our dues are her personal ATM. Oh, and she's best friends with our HOA president, Gerald Thornfield, which makes her practically untouchable. Now, here's where things get tricky. My corner lot means trash pickup, requires me to place my bin right near the curb every Tuesday morning. According to city ordinance, it has to be within 3 feet of the street, and wouldn't you know it, that exact spot is right in the path of Brenda's daily 6:15 a.m. power walk. The very first incident went down on a Tuesday in September, 2nd week of school. I was in the kitchen, kids getting ready, coffee brewing, garbage truck still 20 minutes out when suddenly crack. It sounded like a gunshot. I bolted outside to find my trash can absolutely destroyed. Plastic shards everywhere, garbage scattered across the driveway like someone set off a confetti bomb packed with banana peels and coffee grounds. And there she was, Brenda, backing up her Pearl, white Escalade, rolling down her window with the fakest concerned smile I've ever seen. "Oh my," she said, not a hint of sincerity in her voice. "These streets are just so narrow. I hope you weren't too attached to that old thing. I'd bought that can a week earlier from Home Depot, for $23, but I bit my tongue, kept my cool. So, there I was 20 minutes on my knees in the driveway, scooping up soggy cereal boxes and coffee filters while the stench of diesel exhaust hung in the air. Meanwhile, Emma and Tyler stood at the front window, watching their dad crawl around in his pajamas, embarrassed beyond belief. That first week, it didn't just happen once. It happened 3 more times, same routine, every morning at 6:15 sharp, the roar of her oversized engine, the sickening crunch of plastic meeting steel, and then silence as Brenda drove off like nothing happened. By Friday, I was suspicious. By the following Tuesday, I knew for sure. It wasn't an accident. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Olivia, confirmed it. In her careful English, she told me, she takes the long way on purpose. There's plenty of room on the other side, but she always drives close to your can. That's when I decided to confront Brenda. I caught her during one of her afternoon patrols. "Hey, about the trash can situation," I started. But she cut me off, plastering on that fake, sugary smile. "Marcus, I understand you're new to community living. These streets were designed for normal, sized vehicles, not oversized containers blocking traffic flow. Perhaps you should consider placement timing adjustments, as if there's some magical hour when the garbage truck doesn't need the bin at the curb." That night I started digging property rights, HOA bylaws, city ordinances. If Brenda wanted a war, I was ready to fight with facts. Turns out, even when a trash can is placed on the public right-of way, it's still considered personal property. And here's the kicker, our HOA doesn't have a single rule about trash can timing or materials, the only requirement. They can't be visible from the street except on collection day. By the end of the month, I'd already replaced 4 trash cans, $92 down the drain. Meanwhile, the kids were stressed out from the daily chaos, and my custody evaluator was taking notes about neighborhood stability issues. Something had to change. That's when the smirk appeared. Brenda started locking eyes with me during her morning demolition runs, flashing this smug little smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing. Game on. By mid-October, she took things beyond property damage and into psychological warfare. One afternoon, I came home from a job site to find a certified letter waiting on the counter, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even tear it open. The thick paper felt expensive, the ink still fresh. This wasn't some generic form letter. It read, "Improper trash receptacle placement creating a traffic hazard." Written in flawless legal jargon that would make a paralegal proud, Section 4, 7. 3. No obstruction of vehicular traffic patterns. That was the charge. The deadline, 72 hours to fix the so-called violation, or start racking up $50 a day in fines. It was obvious Brenda had rushed this through the system, hoping to blindside me while the board was still reeling from the evidence I'd presented at the last meeting. But here's where being an electrician for over 20 years paid off. When something doesn't add up, you don't just shrug, you dig until you find the short. That night, I dove into municipal law like I was tracing a live circuit. 3 hours of cross. Referencing city ordinances with county codes later, I struck gold. The law was crystal clear. Trash cans must be placed within 3 feet of the curb on collection day. Even better HOA authority ends at the property line. They have zero control over the public right-of way. I even remembered reading about a case in California where a homeowner beat their HOA with this exact argument. So I spent the weekend building my defense like I was prepping for the contractor's exam all over again. I installed a Ring doorbell cam $47 for total peace of mind, angled perfectly to capture Brenda's morning routine. I hired a professional surveyor to certify that my trash can placement complied with city rules, and I even convinced Mrs. Olivia to sign a written statement, though her hands trembled as she did. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. But something about this still didn't sit right. While I was digging into codes and building my defense, Brenda was busy playing social media prosecutor. She went on a posting spree across the Nextdoor app, blasting out warnings about reckless homeowners endangering children, and dangerous corner obstacles forcing responsible drivers into oncoming traffic. The comment section turned into an all-out war, her 3 loyal supporters squaring off against everyone else who thought she'd completely lost touch with reality. And then came the twist that proved just how desperate she was getting. A buddy of mine at City Hall, Dave, who works in the permit office, we've done electrical jobs together, called me early Tuesday morning with some interesting news. The city had received 4 separate complaints about my hazardous corner, each one supposedly from a different witness, but all clearly written by the same person. The timestamps, all within 15 minutes, at 2:47 a.m. Professional detective work this is not, Marcus. Dave chuckled over the phone. Either your neighborhood has an outbreak of insomniacs with identical writing styles, or somebody's working overtime to build a case against you. By Thursday night's board meeting, I was ready. I had a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Walking into the community center, the air reeked of industrial carpet cleaner and decades of stale municipal politics. That Thursday night, 12 homeowners showed up, a record crowd. President Thornfield kept fidgeting with his tie, adjusting it every 30 seconds like the pressure was suffocating him. Brenda sat at the board table in a navy blazer that practically screamed, "I mean business." But when she reached for her water glass, I caught the slight tremor in her hands. She knew what was coming. When they opened the floor for old business, I stood up, folder in hand. I'd like to address the violation notice regarding my trash can placement. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the room went still. I read the city ordinance aloud, word for word, then laid out my survey results showing perfect compliance. The knockout punch, casually mentioning my consultation with Amanda Sterling, a property rights attorney who's handled dozens of HOA battles. She found the selective enforcement patterns in this community particularly interesting. I added, watching Brenda's face drain of color. President Thornfield cleared his throat once, then twice, then a third time before mumbling, "Well, this requires further review. We'll table this matter pending additional consideration." Translation, they had nothing, and everyone in that room knew it, but Brenda wasn't finished. As we filtered out into the parking lot under the buzzing security lights, she cornered me. Her voice was sharp, loud enough for a dozen neighbors lingering nearby to catch every word. "You think you're so smart," she hissed. "People like you come into decent neighborhoods and think the rules don't apply. Well, I've got news for you. This is just the beginning, Mrs. Rodriguez from Maple Street audibly gasped. Jim Torres, the maintenance guy, suddenly found his keys very, very interesting. The racial undertones lingered in the humid October air like smoke after a house fire. Thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. And my phone, tucked casually into my shirt pocket, captured every venomous word she spit out. That night, Emma looked at me with worried eyes and asked, "Why does the mean lady hate us so much?" Tyler followed with, "Dad, are we gonna have to move again?" I tucked them into bed, assuring them everything would be fine. But privately, I was running the numbers in my head, 3 destroyed trash cans, 14 hours of documentation, attorney fees stacking higher by the week. This war was costing me, and yet something in the neighborhood had shifted. Other homeowners were starting to whisper about board overreach, asking uncomfortable questions about selective enforcement. Brenda's parking lot meltdown hadn't exposed me. It had exposed her. Everyone could see now this wasn't about traffic safety or community standards. It was about power. Control and punishing anyone she didn't like. The very next morning, Brenda's behavior told the story. No more speeding into my ken like a wrecking ball. This time she crept past it at a crawl, eyeing it like a general planning her next campaign. The pattern was changing, and if I'd learned one thing by now, it was this: when Brenda shifted tactics, it meant trouble was coming. November arrived in Pinewood Gardens like a cold slap in the face, and Brenda struck back harder than ever. While I was celebrating what I thought was a victory, she was busy weaponizing every obscure HOA bylaw she could dig up. The woman had combed through the community guidelines like a prosecutor building a RICO case, and when she finally launched her attack, it came in waves. First came the violation about my grass height, apparently 75 inches, a full quarter-inch over the HOA sacred 5-inch maximum. Then my mailbox color. Heritage blue, they said, had faded into an unapproved shade of weathered navy. And finally, 3 microscopic tears in my window screens, so small you'd need a magnifying glass to even spot them. Each violation carried a $50 fine and a 10-day deadline. But here's the kicker. I spent one Saturday walking the neighborhood with a tape measure and a camera. 14 other properties had the exact same issues. Gerald Thornfield's grass was almost 3 inches high. Mrs. Patterson's mailbox, faded nearly the same as mine. Half the houses on Maple Street had screen damage from the summer hailstorm. And yet only my home received official citations, selective enforcement, plain and simple. While Brenda was busy acting, like the HOA personal prosecutor, I was having coffee with Dale Kowalski at the Home Depot contractor desk. Dale's been pouring concrete for 23 years. I mentioned my trash can problem, and his weathered face broke into a grin. "You know," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee with a paint stick, "there's nothing in the city code about what your trash container has to be made of. Plastic, metal, concrete, doesn't matter. As long as it holds garbage and meets size requirements, you're golden." That one comment planted a seed, one that would soon grow into Brenda's worst nightmare. 60 pounds of concrete mix, steel rebar reinforcement, a clever modification to a standard plastic shell. Total cost $47. Compared to the $350 I was staring down in fines and replacement cans, it was a bargain. But before I could put my plan into action, I still had to face Brenda's harassment campaign head on. Tuesday night, I put together a full photo record every single comparable violation across the neighborhood. By Wednesday morning, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board for selective and discriminatory enforcement. Here's something I've learned after 20 years of pulling electrical permits. Bureaucrats hate it when you use their own systems against them. My complaint backed the board into a corner. They either had to enforce the rules equally across all properties or admit they were deliberately targeting me. In either way, Brenda lost, but the real twist came when I dug into the demographics of her violation notices. Over the past year, Brenda had issued 67 citations. 9 of them went to single parents, elderly residents, or minorities. Only 18 went to married couples or long-term homeowners. The pattern wasn't just suspicious, it practically screamed lawsuit. I'd read enough about the Fair Housing Act to know discrimination in HOA enforcement can bring federal investigators knocking. The idea of Brenda sitting across from a civil rights attorney, explaining her citation patterns, was the first thing that made me smile in weeks. By Friday afternoon, I was ready for Phase 2, the concrete project. Emma and Tyler thought it was hilarious helping me mix cement in the garage while classic rock blared from my paints, blattered radio. The sharp, earthy smell of wet concrete hit me with nostalgia. It took me straight back to helping my dad pour our basement floor 3 decades ago. That same alkaline bite in the air always meant one thing: permanence. The design was simple but genius. A hollow base for weight distribution, drainage holes to keep it functional, and an exterior shell that looked exactly like every other trash can in Pinewood Gardens. From the outside, ordinary on the inside. 60 pounds of steel forced concrete, waiting to teach Brenda a hard physics lesson about what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Monday morning, I rolled the can out to its usual spot. By 6:15, right on schedule, the low growl of Brenda's engine echoed down the street. But this time her approach felt different, slower, more cautious, like she knew something was off, even though the can looked perfectly normal. Then came the hit, about 15 miles per hour, her standard ramming speed, but the sound wasn't the familiar crunch of plastic surrendering. No, this time it was a gut, punching thunk followed by the high-pitched scream of metal grinding against solid concrete. Her Escalade's running board folded like tin foil on impact, while my trash can stood there almost looking insulted. From my kitchen window, coffee mug warming my hands, I watched her sit frozen behind the wheel. 30 long seconds ticked by as confusion painted her face. Then she slammed the gas again, this time from a different angle. The result, identical, more brutal damage to her SUV, and my concrete fortress didn't budge an inch. The best part, every ounce of it was perfectly legal, no city codes violated, no HOA bylaws broken. Just a homeowner who decided to upgrade his trash can, If Brenda wanted to keep ramming it, that was entirely her choice and her insurance nightmare to deal with. For the next week, the show continued. Every morning, another attempt. Every collision, another dent, another scrape, another expensive reminder that physics was not on her side. By Friday, her pearl white Escalade looked like it had survived a demolition derby nearly $800 in damage. My trash can, just a couple of proud scuff marks that made it look more authentic. The neighborhood chatter was shifting, and for once, Brenda wasn't the one pulling the strings. By mid-November, she had gone from nosy neighbor to full-blown private investigator. Her obsession with my trash can had become legendary. I swear, she probably dreamt about it, complete with flowcharts, red string, and late-night conspiracy theories. Her once pristine pearl, white Escalade, now battered with dents and scratches, kept circling my street at the strangest hours. She looked less like a homeowner and more like a stalker on a mission. The first clue came on a Tuesday morning. "Mrs." Olivia called me, voice trembling like she was leaking state secrets. "Marcus, that woman was in your driveway last night with a flashlight and a scale. I think she was trying to weigh your trash can." The mental picture almost made me choke on my coffee. Brenda, in her stiff navy blazer and those sensible shoes, sneaking onto my property at midnight, struggling to balance a trash can on a bathroom scale. At that point, she didn't just need a hobby. She needed professional help, but she wasn't done. All week long, her investigation escalated. Jim Torres, our maintenance guy, told me she ambushed him at the hardware store, grilling him about concrete sales like some bargain. Bin detective. A few days later, I noticed she'd been lurking on my Facebook, combing through old posts for any mention of weekend projects. And then came the real kicker. Thursday afternoon, a sharp knock rattled my front door. When I opened it, a city building inspector stood on my porch, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the property. Brenda had officially escalated this war to the bureaucratic level. The inspector showed up the next day, a tired-looking guy named Pete, clearly wishing he was anywhere else but on trash can duty. "Got a complaint about unauthorized concrete structures on residential property," he muttered, checking boxes on his clipboard with all the excitement of a man filling out his taxes. I led him around back, and he gave my trash can about 30 seconds of attention before shaking his head. "Sir, it's a garbage container." Not a foundation, no permits required, no violations, honestly. I've seen people build entire sheds without half this scrutiny. It was the shortest investigation I've ever witnessed, but of course Brenda wasn't done. The very next week, a new letter arrived, this time from the HOA itself. It demanded immediate access to my property for a so-called compliance inspection. The language was laughably formal, but I could practically hear Brenda's voice behind every word. President Thornfield's rubber stamp was just window dressing. That's when my late-night research into property rights finally paid off. I'd spent hours reading court rulings after Brenda's first violation notice, and I knew my rights cold. The key case, Narrett v. Lakeside Village. A ruling that made it crystal clear. HOA can't just barge onto private property for fishing expeditions. They need real cause or a genuine emergency. So, my response was polite but firm. No private property access without a court order. If you'd like to look at my trash receptacle, feel free to admire it from the public sidewalk like everyone else. The stench of Brenda's frustration was almost as satisfying as the smell of fresh concrete. Her Escalade, once pristine, was now basically a moving advertisement for just how tough reinforced steel concrete could be. Every morning, she'd line up for another hit, and every morning. The result was the same. Her SUV took the damage while my trash can stood unfazed. The running board now sagged like a broken limb. Her bumper was cracked in a web of fractures, and one headlight rattled with every turn. The neighborhood had started paying attention. On my Saturday coffee run, I overheard people laughing about the lady who keeps crashing into the same garbage can. Mrs. Rodriguez even started timing Brenda's bizarre routine, while the teens on Elm Street had turned it into a full-on betting game. At home, my kids couldn't decide whether to be embarrassed or proud. Emma sighed at dinner. Dad, everyone at school knows us as the family with the concrete trash can lady. Should I hide or brag? Tyler, on the other hand, saw nothing but profit. We should charge admission. $5 per seat, my college tuition, paid for by watching her wreck her car every morning. But the real turning point came when Patricia Lopez, the only reasonable HOA board member, pulled me aside after a neighborhood meeting. Whispering over paper cups at the community center's coffee station, Patricia dropped a bombshell that shifted everything. "Marcus, you need to know. Brenda's been meeting privately with Gerald. She's pushing the board to give her sweeping enforcement powers. We're talking property inspections, restrictions on building materials, even background checks on contractors." But Patricia wasn't done. Her biggest reveal wasn't about control. It was about money. Every budget meeting, Brenda shows up with detailed proposals for maintenance contracts from some company I've never even heard of. It's like she's been laying the groundwork for months. That night, I shifted gears. If Brenda's obsession went beyond a trash can, maybe it wasn't just about authority. It was about profit. So I dug in. Public records can be gold mines if you know where to search, and municipal contract databases tell stories people don't want told. By Sunday night, I had uncovered the truth. Brenda Whitmore wasn't just the neighborhood tyrant with too much free time. She was running a full-blown scam, and my concrete trash fortress. It had accidentally blown a hole right through her little empire. Funny enough, Sunday nights used to mean helping Emma with her history projects or Tyler with algebra. Now they were about unmasking the corruption sitting right next door. That evening, I was buried in the city's public contract database, chasing a hunch Patricia Lopez had planted in my mind like a splinter I couldn't ignore. I started simple, searching for any business tied to the name Whitmore, and then I found it, Whitmore Construction, LLC. Formed just 6 months ago, listed owners, Brenda Whitmore holding 40%. And her husband Richard, conveniently named as president. The timeline made my stomach turn. Company formed in May, first HOA contract bid in July, Brenda's harassment campaign against me. Early September, the pieces didn't just fit, they snapped together with surgical precision. For the next 2 hours I went down the rabbit hole. What I uncovered would have made a forensic accountant cry tears of joy. In just 4 months, Whitmore Construction had secured 7 separate HOA maintenance contracts, landscape edging, sidewalk repairs, community center shops, even playground maintenance. Total value, $23,400, but the bidding patterns were the smoking gun. On every single job, Whitmore Construction undercut the competition by the same margin. Just $50 to $100. Not enough to raise red flags, but enough to guarantee they'd win every time. It was like watching a card game where the dealer already knew every hand. Technically legal, but clearly rigged, and then came the kicker. The part that made my electrician's brain light up like a breaker box on overload. Brenda herself had voted to approve every single one of those contracts. I had suspected something was off with those contracts, but I never realized how deep the rot went. Every time I questioned the numbers, Brenda came back with polished, almost rehearsed explanations, like she'd been preparing for my doubts all along. Dale leaned over the photos of her battered SUV, studying them like a mechanic at a crime scene. "That bumper alone's a $2,000 fix," he muttered. "And the alignment, she's going to chew through tires faster than she can replace them. Your concrete cans are teaching her one hell of an expensive lesson." The room cracked into grim laughter, but the mood quickly turned serious as we laid out our plan. This wasn't going to be a random fight. It had to be coordinated, strategic. Jim would keep eyes on Brenda, documenting any retaliation or slip-ups. Mrs. Olivia would rally the neighborhood, knocking on doors and gathering support. Patricia had the inside track, she'd work the board, quietly pushing for a full audit. And Dale, he'd act as our technical expert, dissecting every repair contract with a builder's eye. The legal strategy was trickier. Attorney Amanda Sterling confirmed what we all knew. We had airtight cases for harassment, fraud, and board misconduct. But the timing had to be perfect. Move too soon, and Brenda might torch the evidence. Wait too long, and she could finish her cover-up. We weren't just planning resistance anymore. We were preparing an offensive. After 22 years of electrical troubleshooting, one lesson had burned itself into my brain. Complex problems demand layered solutions. You don't fix a short circuit by swapping out a single fuse. You fix the entire system. That was the mindset we needed here. Fighting Brenda and her HOA machine on one front wouldn't cut it. We'd strike from 4 directions at once. Legal pressure through criminal complaints and civil lawsuits. Social pressure with petitions and neighborhood organizing. Political pressure by dragging this into the media and city oversight. Financial pressure through forced audits and contract cancellations. The campaign began Wednesday morning. Armed with airtight documentation and presentation packets that looked more corporate boardroom than neighborhood squabble, I started knocking on doors across Pinewood Gardens. The results were electric. Within hours, I'd collected 89 signatures defending property rights, 34 neighbors demanding immediate audits, and 12 willing to testify at the board meeting. Not every encounter was smooth. Mrs. Rodriguez on Maple Street nearly slammed her door in my face before I even got the first sentence out. But once I showed her the paper trail, the contracts, the payouts, the lies her eyes hardened, she signed. This wasn't just my fight anymore. The neighborhood was waking up. 5 minutes later, Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't just signing. She was stabbing her pen into the petition like it was Brenda's face, muttering sharp Spanish insults under her breath. That woman tried to fine me for putting my garbage can out 15 minutes early. She raged. 15 minutes, what are we now? The garbage police with synchronized stopwatches. As the signatures piled up, patterns began to emerge. Brenda's die. Hard loyalists were mostly long-time homeowners who'd thrived under her selective rule enforcement. The undecideds, newer residents, afraid of retaliation or nervous about property values. But the majority. They were ready, aching even, to see accountability. Media prep took 3 full days. Channel 7's investigative unit was known for exposing municipal corruption, and reporter Sarah Kim had dismantled HOA twice Brenda's size. Our press kit was airtight. Professional graphics, expert legal opinions, and 12 solid minutes of edited footage showing Brenda repeatedly ramming her Escalade into my immovable trash can. Then the story detonated online. The Pinewood Gardens Transparency Facebook group swelled to 67 members in just 4 days, each post fueling the fire. Neighbors unloading their own stories of harassment, selective enforcement, and suspicious expenses. One video in particular went viral, a time-lapse of Brenda's daily bumper car routine set to circus music. The community laughed, shared, and rallied, and Thursday morning, attempt number 53, my trash can stood firm as always. Brenda's SUV, not so much. A headlight now dangled loose, swinging like a broken tooth. By now, the whole neighborhood had turned my driveway into a spectator sport. Kids gathered at the bus stop earlier than usual, clutching backpacks and phones, waiting for Brenda's daily demolition derby. Emma told me her classmates had nicknamed our place the house with the indestructible trash can. Tyler, ever the entrepreneur, was making 50 cents a head charging kids to watch the highlight reel on his phone. The story wasn't just spreading. It was mutating, exploding, faster than gossip at a church potluck. By Sunday night, everything was locked in. Tuesday, the board meeting showdown. Wednesday, media interviews with Channel 7. Thursday, criminal complaints ready to file. 118 residents confirmed to pack the boardroom, 17 of them armed with speeches that could peel paint off the walls. The coalition was united, the evidence airtight, and Brenda. She had no clue what storm was about to hit her. But desperation has a smell, burnt coffee, panic sweat, and gasoline fumes. That weekend, Brenda reeked of it. She went completely off the rails. It was clear Brenda felt the walls closing in, because her tactics jumped from petty harassment to borderline criminal faster than her Escalade could smash into my concrete barricade. Saturday night, a sharp hiss yanked me out of sleep. I peered through the bedroom window just in time to catch a shadow crouched by my trash can, frozen under the glare of the motion sensor. By the time I grabbed my phone and bolted outside, the figure was gone, leaving behind sloppy orange spray paint across the concrete. One word, move. Here's the irony: spray paint on concrete vanishes with a 30-second pressure wash, but hide, definition security cameras. They don't forget. Every second of the stunt was captured crystal clear, right down to the license plate of a Pearl, white Escalade parked 3 houses away. By Monday, her desperation hit a new low. A fake complaint to the gas company accused me of suspicious excavation that might damage underground lines. The inspector who showed up was polite but meticulous, spending 2 full hours scanning my yard. Finally, he shook his head, packing up his equipment. Honestly, he said, whoever filed this either needs glasses or psychiatric help. There's no excavation anywhere on your property. That should have been the end of it. But Tuesday morning delivered the clearest proof yet that Brenda had gone off the deep end. I ran into Jim Torres at the hardware store, his face carved with concern. "Marcus," he said grimly, "she's hired Riverside Security to watch your house. $200 a day over a trash can. The woman's lost her damn mind. But here's the thing about surveillance, it cuts both ways. My upgraded system had already logged her late, night drive, buys, her obsessive photo sessions, and every twitch in her unraveling routine. She was coming apart at the seams, and my cameras were preserving it all in high definition clarity. Wednesday is when it stopped being ridiculous and became personal. Emma came home from school shaken. She'd overheard Brenda whispering to another parent about bad influences and unfit role models for neighborhood kids. The racial undertones weren't even subtle, and with my custody situation, the implications were deadly serious. That night I made my own hire Beth Morrison, retired detective harassment specialist, worth every penny of her $200 a day. Not only could she professionally document Brenda's stalking, she could testify in court about escalation patterns and threat behavior. By week's end, Brenda's sabotage attempts had hit overdrive. Someone splashed what looked like battery acid across my concrete trash can. All it left was a faint scar, cosmetic at best, but then came the flood of anonymous city complaints. My lawn, my permits, my electrical work. Brenda was throwing everything she had, hoping something, anything, would stick. The fake reviews were bad enough poisoning my business's Google listing faster than I could get them flagged. But Friday evening crossed into something far darker. Tyler was in the driveway, tinkering with his bike, when his voice cut through the air, tight, uneasy. "Dad, what's this thing under your truck?" I crouched down and froze. A small black box clung to the undercarriage, lights blinking red like a heartbeat. Magnetic mount, professional, grade GPS tracker, maybe $300 retail, definitely illegal without consent. My hands shook as I snapped photos from every angle before prying it loose. Within 20 minutes, I was at the police station, the device sealed in an evidence bag. Officer Derek Martinez took the report, his face carrying the weary look of a man who's seen too many disputes turn criminal. "Mr. Holloway," he said evenly, "this isn't just neighbor drama anymore. We're talking unauthorized surveillance, stalking, harassment, all felonies if the DA pursues them." At the same time, another thread of Brenda's scheme unraveled. Turns out she'd filed a $3,200 insurance claim, swearing her latest collision happened on a public road instead of my driveway. Road hazard damage, fraud clear as daylight. The net around her was tightening, but she was still thrashing wildly. And every move was only making her case worse. The problem for Brenda was my Ring camera. Weeks of footage, from multiple angles, showing her SUV deliberately targeting my trash can again and again. When State Farm's investigator called me in for an interview, I didn't just show up. I came armed, 50, 3 documented collisions. Witness statements, a polished video compilation, a professional damage assessment proving the impacts weren't accidental. The investigator didn't even need 5 minutes. His tone went from routine to razor, sharp. "Ma'am, this isn't road hazard damage. This is deliberate property destruction with a luxury vehicle, no less. The claim is denied, and I'm forwarding this to our fraud unit for criminal review." Meanwhile, the pressure in the neighborhood was reaching boiling point. Our Facebook group had swelled to 94 members, each sharing their own nightmare encounters with Brenda. Mrs. Patterson complained about harassment over her rose bushes. The Johnsons on Oak Street had been fined for their kids' sidewalk chalk art. Even Gerald Thornfield, one of her few allies, was quietly backing away, and then came Saturday morning. Collision attempt number 57. This time, the crash ended with Brenda's bumper completely ripped off, left stranded in my driveway like a trophy. The image of her, in full business attire, crawling on the pavement to scoop up shattered plastic while neighbors peeked from their windows. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so utterly pathetic. By Sunday night, everything was ready. The evidence was airtight. Criminal behavior documented, witness statements notarized, financial fraud exposed, and a community coalition armed to the teeth. Tuesday's board meeting wasn't going to be a confrontation. It was going to be a public execution. The only problem. Brenda didn't know it yet, but Monday morning, just 12 hours before our planned showdown, she played her most desperate card. Gerald Thornfield called an emergency closed-door session, citing liability concerns and community safety issues. His voicemail sounded like he'd been gargling gravel and panic, classic damage control. 3 board members locked in the community center office while Prescott and Associates star attorney, Harold Masterson, billed $400 an hour to figure out how deep in legal quicks, and they were sinking. Through the blinds, I caught glimpses animated arguments, frantic hand gestures, Brenda practically waving stacks of paper like a white flag. Patricia Lopez, texting me updates from inside, delivered the real bombshell. Brenda's claiming you made terrorist threats. She wants emergency powers to seize your dangerous modifications. Harold looks like he'd rather be defending serial killers. The cover-up attempt was as sloppy as Brenda's daily demolition runs. Someone had tried to backdate Whitmore Construction's conflict of interest disclosures, but the email server's digital timestamps told the real story. You can't just rewrite ethics after the fact, especially when the original contract votes are permanently recorded in the meeting minutes. Meanwhile, the insurance investigation was gathering speed, faster than Brenda's Escalade slamming into my concrete fortress. State investigator Maria Santos had already subpoenaed HOA financials, board minutes, and every communication between Brenda and the insurance carrier. The paper trail wasn't subtle, it was a slow-motion train wreck, but Tuesday afternoon delivered the biggest twist yet. My phone rang. Richard Whitmore, Brenda's husband, a man who, until now, had silently watched his wife torch their reputation, and their bank account one crash at a time. "Marcus," he whispered, his voice trembling, almost breaking. Brenda's legal troubles were multiplying faster than her collision attempts. The state insurance commissioner had investigator Maria Santos assembling a criminal fraud case. The district attorney was reviewing harassment and stalking charges. Even the IRS now had documentation of unreported income from her construction kickbacks. By 6 p.m., the community center looked less like a board meeting and more like a public trial. Cars packed both sides of Maple Street, neighbors hauling lawn chairs like they were tailgating a scandal. Channel 7's news van rolled in at 5:30 sharp, followed by Channel 12 and the Metro Weekly reporter, who'd been sniffing around the story for weeks. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew. 118 residents crammed into a room built for 40, with another dozen pressed against the walls and spilling into the hallway. The scent of nervous sweat and burnt coffee only amplified the tension. Brenda finally entered, late and flanked by attorney Harold Masterson. Dressed in funeral black, hands trembling so visibly it drew whispers, she looked like a defendant walking into sentencing. Gerald Thornfield tugged at his tie like it was slowly strangling him. Their intimidation tactic fizzled instantly. Masterson hadn't even finished his polished line about frivolous complaints when Mrs. Olivia rose from the third row, clutching a thick stack of papers. "Excuse me," she said firmly, her accent sharpening the words, "but which one of us has been committing insurance fraud and stealing from our community?" The room exploded applause, nervous laughter, voices overlapping. 17 neighbors had signed up to speak, each one armed with receipts, videos, or evidence of Brenda's harassment and corruption. 3 bankers' boxes brimmed with collision footage, contract audits, and criminal complaint files, but none of it compared to the bombshell waiting in the wings. At exactly 6:45, just as Brenda fumbled through another excuse about the Whitmore contracts, the double doors of the community center swung open. Officer Derek Martinez strode in, uniform crisp, an official, looking folder tucked under his arm, sorry to interrupt, he said, his voice cutting through the packed room like a gavel strike. "But I have a warrant to serve regarding insurance fraud and stalking charges." The silence was deafening. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Brenda's face drained of color, her expression collapsing like a building losing structural support. Harold Masterson leaned in frantically, whispering legal advice that sounded more like last rites. Gerald Thornfield clutched at his chest, sweat dripping down his temple, as if the walls were closing in. Game over, checkmate. The community center had never seen anything like it. 120, 7 residents, every single homeowner in Pinewood Gardens, crammed into a space meant for 40, shoulder to shoulder with 15 reporters whose cameras rolled like vultures, circling a fresh kill. The air conditioning didn't stand a chance. Heat pressed down on us, thick and suffocating, while the buzzing lights overhead seemed to vibrate with the collective anticipation. What had started as a petty feud over a trash can was about to end in the kind of spectacle that would be retold in Pinewood Gardens for decades. And this was only the beginning of Brenda Whitmore's unraveling. I'd picked my spot with care, 3rd row, dead center, flanked by Mrs. Olivia and Jim Torres, and beside me, like a star witness awaiting its moment on the stand, sat my concrete trash can, rolled in proudly as Exhibit A, a 60-pound monument to Brenda's arrogance, now transformed into the ultimate symbol of her downfall. Brenda sat at the board table looking like she'd rather be anywhere else her once Bauer navy blazer swapped out for funeral black. Every few seconds her eyes darted toward the exit, like a cornered animal calculating escape routes. Harold Masterson leaned in close, whispering frantic legal advice, while Gerald Thornfield mopped sweat from his collar like a man about to face his own execution. Then came Officer Martinez's entrance, folder in hand, warrant inside. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The room froze, save for the mechanical whir of news cameras and the sharp, nervous staccato of Brenda's pen tapping against the table. A desperate Morse code spelling out "Help me." Gerald's voice cracked as he banged for order. We'll now hear public comments regarding recent community concerns. That was my cue. I rose slowly, carrying my presentation boards like a prosecutor stepping before a jury. The crowd leaned forward as one. You could hear the faint hum of the exit sign transformer as I cleared my throat. Ladies and gentlemen. I began, my voice steady, cutting through the charged silence. The evidence speaks for itself. The gasps and nervous laughter from the crowd became the perfect soundtrack to Brenda's highlight reel of collisions, each one more desperate than the last. Then came the moment I'd been rehearsing for weeks, the mic drop. I turned to face her directly, letting the cameras catch every angle. "Mrs. Whitmore," I began, my voice steady, cutting through the silence. "You've burned through $3, $400 on lawyers, totaled your $60, 0. Escalade, committed insurance fraud and stalked my family, all over a $23 trash can, but that isn't the real crime. I paused, letting the tension hang before delivering the kill shot. The real crime is the $47,000 you've stolen from this community through your family's construction company. The explosion was immediate. The room erupted. Neighbors who had quietly grumbled for months now roared with outrage. Mrs. Rodriguez leapt to her feet, shouting in rapid fire Spanish that didn't sound like praise. The teenagers from Elm Street clapped and whistled like they were front row at a concert. And then Brenda cracked. She shot up from her chair like a jackin. The box with its spring snapped loose, her mask of composure shattering in real time. Patricia Lopez rose slowly, her posture regal despite the pandemonium swirling around her. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice cut clean through Brenda's shrieks and the buzz of the cameras. "I move," she declared, that Brenda Whitmore be immediately removed from the HOA Board of Directors, barred from holding any position of authority within this association, and referred to law enforcement for prosecution. The room froze for a heartbeat, then, like a dam bursting, hands shot into the air. Second, shouted 3 voices at once. Jim Torres, Mrs. Olivia, and even quiet Mr. Henderson, who hadn't spoken in a meeting for 5 years. The roar of approval was deafening. Neighbors pounded the tables, clapped, even stomped their feet against the linoleum floor. Channel 7's microphone boom dipped low to catch every chant of vote, vote, vote. Brenda, while dyed and streaked with mascara, tried to shout over the din, but her voice was drowned out. Gerald Thornfield, sweating through his collar, knew he had no control left. With trembling hands he called for the vote. 118 residents, 118 raised hands, unanimous. The gavel strike sounded less like an official motion passed, and more like the closing act of a public execution. I move for the immediate suspension of Brenda Whitmore from the board, pending a full criminal investigation and financial audit. The motion passed unanimously 4-0, while Brenda sat handcuffed to Officer Martinez's chair, unable to cast anything but a glare. Justice served, ice cold, with a generous side of public humiliation. What followed was a chain reaction of consequences that fell like dominoes. Within 48 hours of her meltdown, Brenda's empire collapsed faster than her Escalade's suspension after a run-in with my concrete trash can. By Tuesday, her resignation landed in the HOA inbox, a 2-line rant blaming hostile work environment and personal attacks. By Thursday, the district attorney had filed insurance fraud charges, carrying up to 6 months in jail and $5,000 in fines. On Friday, her insurance license was revoked. Hours later, Whitmore Construction's contractor certification was suspended. And then came the money trail. Our emergency HOA audit handled by Patterson and Associates CPA uncovered $47,000 in padded invoices, kickbacks, and blatantly shady contracts. Every homeowner received a $170 refund check. By Christmas, the sweetest holiday gift Pinewood Gardens had ever seen. Some families framed theirs like trophies. Richard Whitmore called me one final time. His voice was hollow, stripped of the bravado I remembered. "The civil settlement check is in the mail," he muttered. $12,500 as agreed. "Brenda, she wanted me to tell you she's moving to Florida, to live with her sister." For a fleeting second, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Then I remembered the GPS tracker under my car, the fake insurance claims, the 57 collisions, and the months of harassment that had turned my family into prisoners in our own home. Some lessons come expensive. For the Whitmores, this one cost everything. The transformation that followed was nothing short of remarkable. Patricia Lopez won the special election for board president in a unanimous vote. Her campaign built on transparency, accountability, and community trust. Under her leadership, the HOA introduced airtight reforms, strict conflict of interest disclosures, mandatory monthly financial reports, and open contractor bidding that made even city councils look. Sloppy, the first major project under this new era of governance, a long, overdue playground renovation funded entirely by the $47,000 we'd clawed back from Brenda's schemes. Watching Emma and Tyler sketch their dream slides and swings alongside neighbors who once whispered about our troublesome family that was emotional vindication disguised as practical progress. And the impact didn't stop at Pinewood Gardens. Holloway v. Pinewood Gardens became a legal precedent, cited in cases across the state as the gold standard for HOA transparency and homeowner rights. The trash can war was over. The neighborhood was stronger, and Brenda Whitmore, she'd become the cautionary tale whispered at HOA seminars and law school ethics classes. All that because one man refused to move a concrete trash can. The HOA downfall didn't just change Pinewood Gardens, it rewrote the rulebook. Our case was cited in 12 subsequent property rights battles across Ohio, each one chipping away at the unchecked power of corrupt boards. The state legislature passed the HOA Accountability Act, mandating financial disclosures, and third, party audits regulations so airtight that insurance investigators praised them as the new gold standard for municipal oversight. Channel 7's investigative series won a regional Emmy for exposing suburban corruption, and reporter Sarah Kim still calls me now and then whenever new HOA reform legislation hits the State House. The original collision footage, over 200 zero views on YouTube, sparking grassroots resistance movements from Toledo to Cincinnati. And then there was the trash can, my once mocked concrete monument had become a neighborhood relic. We installed it in the community center lobby, complete with a bronze plaque reading, "Property Rights Protected 2023. New homeowners hear the full saga during orientation, while visiting contractors often ask to see the famous indestructible can that toppled a corrupt board. But for all the headlines, lawsuits, and legislative reforms, the real victory was the healing. Neighbors who once whispered about that family with the trash can now waved from across the street. Kids who'd grown up under Brenda's shadow were designing playgrounds together, and our communities, scarred, tested, but stronger, finally understood that accountability wasn't just a principle. It was the foundation of a neighborhood worth fighting for. The Concrete Can Days Festival we established now draws families from 3 neighboring developments every September. The event features bounce houses, barbecue competitions, and educational workshops on homeowner rights. Last year's attendance topped 800 people, transforming our community's trauma into triumph and turning our act of resistance into a full-blown celebration. The Marcus Holloway Property Rights Scholarship, funded with the settlement money, has already helped 4 students attend college. It prioritizes applicants who demonstrate creative problem-solving in the face of institutional opposition, essentially rewarding future troublemakers who refuse to accept injustice quietly. Emma and Tyler absorbed lessons no civics class could ever teach. Emma's college application essay, detailing how she fought corruption with concrete evidence, earned her admission to 3 journalism programs. Tyler launched a YouTube channel, Suburban Justice, covering HOA disputes across the Midwest with the zeal of a teenage investigative reporter. The personal healing was the most surprising. My custody evaluation improved dramatically after the community rallied around our family. The judge noted that children benefit from seeing parents stand up for principles and protect family interests through legal channels rather than violence or surrender. My electrical contracting business also flourished, fueled by referrals from neighbors impressed by my documentation skills and strategic thinking. Methodical problem-solving, it turns out, translates just as well from HOA disputes to complex wiring projects. And my reputation for getting results the right way opened doors throughout the county, proving that integrity and perseverance pay off in more ways than one. Sometimes David really does beat Goliath, but only when David comes armed with evidence, allies, and 60 pounds of steel reinforced concrete. Drop a comment below and share your own HOA nightmare. Let's build a database of corruption and help each other fight back. Hit subscribe if you want more stories where the little guy wins through preparation, patience, and perfect timing. Justice tastes best when served with community support and creative problem solving. Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens finally meet their match. If this story had you cheering, cringing, or laughing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and subscribe so you don't miss the next wild HOA showdown.